Alright, finally. Good evening and welcome to Midnight Movie Club and my review of Dr. Sleep. Sorry it took me a while to get round to this one. Work and uni just kicked my ass for the past week, but we are back and we are back with another review. So without further ado, let's get into it. Dr. Sleep was written and directed by Mike Flanagan, the same man who brought us Gerald's Game, and the film stars Ewan McGregor, Rebecca Ferguson, Kylie Curran, Zach McLarnon and Cliff Curtis. Dr. Sleep picks up 30 odd years after the events of The Shining and follows Dan, all grown up, who is now struggling with alcoholism just like his father once did. Eventually, things begin to look up for Dan when he finds himself in the town of Fraser, where he works driving the train in Teeny Town and is an orderly at the town's hospice. At the hospice, he taps into his shine to help dying patients move on, and in return is given the name of Dr. Sleep. For a while, things are quiet for Dan, but when he meets Abra, a young girl who has a very powerful shine, he is thrust into a shine war with a cult of quasi-demonic nomads called the True Knot. Together, Dan and Abra form an unlikely bond and set out to fight back against the True Knot, who feed on the shine of gifted children to keep their immortality. This war leads Dan back to the place where it all began, the Overlook Hotel. Now first off, I want to talk about the performances and a wee bit about casting, some of which is spot on in this film. Ewan McGregor as Dan is brilliant, no surprises there at all. You buy that he wants to get better throughout the movie and that his past still and always will haunt him. I had no problems looking at him and going, yep, that's wee Danny, all grown up. I felt he really cared for Abra and the patients he helps pass on at the hospice, deserving of the title of Dr. Sleep. He was great at playing a down and out and even better at playing a protector. There is one scene to do with an AA meeting where his acting really shines through in particular as well. All round, he done a solid job of being Dan Torrance. Now to Abra, who gets Dan shining again. Kylie Curran may well have given us the best child actor performance of the year, at least that I've seen, or at least one of them. It's up there with the kids from It. I really loved how fiery she was and how confident she was. She really hated the True Knot and wanted to destroy them, and you felt that. What you also feel is that she is a force to be reckoned with. I really liked her cockiness and the fact that she knew she was powerful, all while still being vulnerable and needing the help of others. She really killed it as Abra Stone for me, and I was really entertained with her performance. As for our antagonist, Rebecca Ferguson plays Rose the Hat, the leader of the True Knot, and she was awesome. She was creepy yet charismatic in a way I didn't expect. She really sold the idea of being one of the True Knot. The delivery of some of her lines was brilliant and really terrifying. In one scene in particular that I will save for the spoiler section, I actually found her Rose to be far more formidable than Rose was in the book, and I felt she was much more capable of giving our protagonists a real struggle. She was everything a leader of a quasi-demonic tribe of nomads had to be. As it goes for supporting roles, Cliff Curtis was great as Billy. I love Cliff Curtis and I love the character of Billy, both in the book and in this film. I just really enjoyed how he portrayed that character. Emily Allen Lind was also great as Snakebite Andy. I absolutely hated her in this film, and that's how we were supposed to feel towards her, so she done her job really well. Also, Carol Lumbly, even though he had limited screen time, was brilliant as Dick Halloran. He was really similar to Scatman Carruthers from The Shining, which was a spot-on casting. Now, one casting I want to talk about in particular is Alex Assault as Wendy Torrance. Now, she may not have looked exactly like Shelley Duvall. She was pretty close, but not quite. But holy shit, did she just sound and act like her. Now, she maybe wasn't as over the top, I would say, but that's because we see her in quieter moments with Danny, not in life-threatening situations. It really caught me off guard just how much she sounded like Wendy from The Shining. It was crazy. Just the way she spoke and the way she moved, she done a great job, and it really made those moments where we see her as Wendy more believable. There are a couple more things I want to talk about casting and such, but I'll leave that for the spoiler section, so let's move on to talk about cinematography. Now when it comes to Mike Flanagan's works, we always know they are going to look good and we are going to get some great cinematography. Here in Dr. Sleep, some scenes had my jaw dropping. I can't mention each scene in particular as that would be spoilers, but you'll know them when you see them. The way he used the sets and shot them was just fantastic, and those certain scenes I am talking about just make for some awesome visuals that will impress you. This guy needs to keep doing what he's doing and hopefully for a long time. Composition and framing is just spot on, showing some things, hiding others, and it all just makes for some visually striking and powerful scenes. As far as pacing goes, for me it was fine. I liked it started off with quieter moments with all of the characters doing their own thing in their daily lives, giving us a sense of who each person was and what they do. I reckon it might be a bit slow for some people right at the start, but for me it was just the way I wanted it. I felt like it could be a bit jumpy in the first act though, and for people who haven't read the book or looked into the story much, they might find it hard to follow along. For me, knowing the characters inside and out, it was fine, but I could see how it could maybe get a little bit confusing for some people. In saying this though, my girlfriend hasn't read The Shining or Dr. Sleep or watched any of the trailers, and she followed it easy. But for me, it felt like it did change place and person a lot and didn't focus too long on one thing. Personally, I liked that though, it kept the film moving, but I could see how it could be a problem for other people. Now let's talk about lighting, set and costume design. Production wise, it looks great. It looks like a Mike Flanagan film. Heavy shadows coupled with lovely pops of colour, drawing your eye to specific things within the frame, and in place, great use of shadows. The colour grading was also solid, and certain practical lighting elements that were used throughout, like fairy lights and bonfires, were great for setting different tones. The set design really shines. That was a bad one, I'm sorry. It really shines through though when it comes to the overlook and how they recreated it, especially when you see it looking all decrepit and run down, which made it even creepier than before. How they use the sets is even more impressive though, with some of the techniques they pull with them, especially with Dan and Abra's rooms. I also loved the True Knots campsites and their Winnebagos. They were pretty much what I had imagined in my head. I loved the almost hippie cultish vibe that the interiors had. The same goes for the True Knot costume design. Some of them look like they are from the modern age and others look like old, and the majority just look weird. Rose especially, her style is a nice mix of modern with a vintage hippie twist. The thing I liked most regarding the True Knot though in this film is something I cannot mention in non-spoilers. Just put it this way, the practical and special effects are awesome for a certain thing. I really didn't think they would be able to pull off what was created in the book, but they got the visuals spot on with the effects. I was also super pleased to see a lot of really nice practical effects. Flanagan has already done some awesome practical stuff, and you should expect the same here in Dr. Sleep. There were a couple of moments where special effects and visuals really stand out, but I just don't want to go into anything because of spoilers, and I want you all to experience it for yourself. I'll discuss things a little more in spoilers though. Now let's touch on music. That iconic theme from The Shining, Desiree, returns, and I loved how they used it and even twisted it and tweaked it slightly for Dr. Sleep, giving the film its own feel. On a whole though, the music throughout the film harkens back to The Shining, and in a way it is good, but in another way it's not so great. For me, there were a couple of times where the music felt out of place. Also at some parts during conversations, because the music just wouldn't stop, kept up. It was kind of annoying. Even if the master just lowered it a little, it would have been better. There were just points in certain conversations where I felt that no music was needed and the dialogue would have been fine. That was one of my small complaints with the film, and it really isn't that big a deal, just a wee nitpick from me. Most of the dialogue is great, and that's the reason I just wanted the music to stop, so I could soak in all of those beautiful words. Also, while we're on sound now, I just want to touch quickly on sound design. There was one thing in the film that they went for through sound regarding the True Knot again that I really liked and felt worked well. I never had that in my head with the book, but I liked it in the film. It made them feel more monstrous for me, but once again, I won't say exactly what it was for spoiler reasons. As an adaptation for me, this film is great. It stays really true to the source material, but drops some things to trim the narrative a little while changing another couple of things that will keep book readers on their toes. I have to say, I really liked the changes they made, and I did prefer a couple of the changes to what happened in the book. There was something left out from the book that was only touched on a little that I would have liked them to incorporate more, but that's just me. It wasn't a deal breaker or anything like that. As an adaptation of the book, Mike Flanagan done it justice with a really good screenplay. Some dialogue is ripped straight from the book and some characters are given some awesome lines. I think book readers will appreciate it. Also, as a sequel to The Shining, I believe Doctor Sleep is a worthy sequel. I would happily watch both films back to back, just as happily as I would read the books back to back. The good thing is for Doctor Sleep though, is that it stands on its own 2 feet. Obviously you would get more enjoyment out of the film if you have seen and liked The Shining, but I believe you could miss The Shining and watch Doctor Sleep and still get it. So, with all this said and done, it's time for my score. I'm going to give Doctor Sleep a 4 out of 5 rating. In my opinion, this is one of the better films of the year so far, possibly top 10 films of the year so far. It's definitely in there for me. I just really enjoyed this one and really want to go see it again and pick up on things that I may have missed. So now let's move on to the spoiler section. So if you have not seen the film, then go see it right now or as soon as you can and then come back and you can hear this part. But if you aren't frantically clicking off right now or trying to close the tab and you're still hanging around, I'm guessing that you've seen the film and want to chat some more about it, this time with spoilers. So let's get into it. First off, we have to start with Baseball Boy. I was worried when I first heard that this film was announced that we wouldn't get to see the film go as far as the book did, with what the True Knot do to children who shine in order to get their steam, but those fears were put to bed when young Jacob Tremblay gets into that van. And the sequence pretty much plays out just like in the book. They torture Baseball Boy in order to get his steam out of him, and it doesn't cut away when Rose brings out that knife. We are there and have to sit through it. It is terrifying and it sticks with you. Jacob Tremblay done a great job. His screams were horrifying and how terrified he looked in the hands of the True. If I were a parent watching this, it would have disturbed me so much. What I also feel was a great choice was the framing of the shot. We never saw the knife stabbing into him, we just saw the blood spraying up onto his face and neck. Most of what was happening was left to our imagination and it made it much, much worse. When Baseball Boy asks if they're going to hurt him and Rose says yes, you just feel so horrible for him, as there is no way out for him. It was a real heavy scene and really shows how horrible and cruel the True Knot are. Another thing I want to touch on are those astral projection scenes and how damn fucking cool they were. That's what I was talking about earlier with the awesome visuals that will make your jaw drop. When Rose was coming down through the clouds searching for Abra's house and then floating upside down over to her room's window, that shit was just so cool. The music, the camera work and the effects in those scenes were just absolute class. I loved how they showed the trap Abra laid in her mind for Rose, as well as how cocky and happy she was when she pulls it off. As I said before, I was really worried about all these visuals and them getting lost in translation and the movie just not looking like what the book puts in your head, but nah man, they plucked that shit straight out my head. It was so good. Another thing I feel like we have to talk about is that big change from the book is poor Billy. Poor fucking Billy, man. Snakebite Andy, who's so hateable in this film, tells him to shoot himself and in a second, without hesitation, he does. Then just like that, Billy is gone and that shit hit me hard. It caught me real off guard as the film lulled me into a false sense of security with how similar it was to the book all the way up until that point. But in a way, I liked it. I know that sounds a bit evil, but instead of Dan and Abra getting such an easy ride as they did in the book, the True Knot gave them a lot more trouble here in the film. They seemed to be much more of a threat. And another thing I really want to talk about, and I think you all would too, is that conversation between Dan and his dad, Jack Torrance. We got our answer. Jack did turn up, but not being portrayed as Jack Nicholson, this time instead being played by Henry Thomas, who you may know from The Haunting of Hill House or Gerald's Game. Now I said previously in another video that if Jack does show up it needs to be Nicholson, de-aging or something like that, and if it's going to be someone else then they may as well not bother, but when it came down to it, I actually didn't mind the change. I think by that part of the film, I was already used to the other actors portraying the original characters. Henry Thomas, I thought, actually done really well playing Jack. His actions and the way he spoke were pretty damn close. Also, they didn't show him head on too much. It was more like a side profile shot, so I like how they shot it. There was a couple times we've seen him from the front, but they've really done his hair and makeup well, and it looked spot on. I also like how Jack had like no recollection of what had happened or who Dan was or who Wendy was as well. He was simply now being used as a pawn by the hotel to lure Dan in as well, just like it did to him. Unlike his dad though, Dan was strong enough to say no. I felt that conversation really cleared up a lot of things though. From what I remember, it made me feel like once the hotel has someone in its grips and it has their soul, it can use them in any way it wishes. Just like Grady had no recollection of being the caretaker as well and was now a waiter in The Shining, I also feel this end to Dan seeing his father one last time was much more fitting for Kubrick's Jack, as he seemed beyond redemption. Whereas with King's Jack in the Shining novel, he could be redeemed, as we see Jack wave at Dan as he leaves the final battle with the Knot, with Billy and Abra, a much happier ending in the book. Now, there is a lot more I want to talk about, but we just can't be here all day. Maybe I'll talk more about the film during my stream this weekend, but the last thing I want to touch on is the ending. Instead of the happier book ending, we get Dan dying, sacrificing himself so Abra can escape the Overlook Hotel as it burns. Finally, on film, we see the Overlook destroyed by its boiler, just like it was in King's Shining novel. Bet he loved seeing that. In a way, it's kind of poetic. Jack dies out in the cold snow and ice, while Dan dies in the warm flames, reflecting on their personalities almost. Jack cold and evil, Dan warm and kind but self-destructive. As soon as Rose stabbed Dan with that axe though, I was gutted. She hit his artery, so he had to die. If he survived that final battle, it would have been so dumb. What a way to go out though. He defeats Rose, releasing his lock boxes on her, which was also visually stunning. It was just an awesome moment and totally badass. Then he's possessed by the hotel and chases Abra, similar to the end of the Shining novel where Jack chases Dan. Then half possessed, half coming out of it, his possessed self then rushes to the boiler room as the hotel finds out that he turned up the boilers, but he fights it enough to stop it, and he stops it from turning off the boiler, which will let it destroy the hotel. He kills himself to kill the hotel once and for all. I was a real big fan of this ending, and I think I may well like it better than the books. Obviously I loved the book's ending as it was a real happy one, but this ending just felt right. It was just kind of cathartic. But that is pretty much the most important spoilers I wanted to discuss right now. I would have liked to have seen Momo in the film and more of Dr. John maybe, some red steam, but that's only minor things. Also, it was never stated that Dan was in fact Abra's half-uncle and that Jack had an affair with her grandmother back in the day, but it was a nice touch that Abra called him Uncle Dan throughout the film. Anyway, let's get discussing more in the comment section down below, and if you enjoyed this video and stayed this long, then please leave a like. Also, if you haven't already, then subscribe to join the club. As always, thank you very much for watching, and good night.